Cantonese. That's who I represent. They trying to inform them about this was insane. I had to get other residents to translate for them. So the communication has not been clear. I spent one day going up and down Boylston's Brookline Ave, looking for where the talk at the station or something. I couldn't find it. I called, I emailed, where is it? Where is it? I don't know. There was no communication. The other thing I want you to do is close your eyes and imagine your mother or your grandmother living and having to walk a half mile to get to a bus. A half mile. What if she just had knee surgery? Have to walk a half mile. It's disgusting that I live in the city of Boston and I can't get to downtown without walking. Well, now I have to walk 8/10 of a mile to get to Fenway because I'm not going to take the bus to Kenmore, which is a seedy station, and don't have me go there. You would not have your mother go there.
Thank you for tuning in to this candidate forum sponsored by Lynn Community Television and the Marblehead League of Women Voters. The candidates running for state representative of the 8th Essex District are Jenny Armini, Diann Baylis, Tristan Smith, Terri Tauro, Thompson, and Titcomb.
Hello, I'm Mukala Kabongo, and welcome to this forum. I'm your host, your moderator, all that good stuff for this evening. We got a lovely crew here with us. We got questions. Once again, this is put together by Lynn Community Television and Marblehead League of Voters. This is for the 8th Essex State Rep. But before we get into everything, before I read these rules for you all, we're just going to get into an opening statement, an intro by Lee Mondale, and let's get to this video.
The League of Women Voters was formed after women achieved the right to vote. The idea was to study and educate women on the issues they would be voting on. Today, the League is an organization of women and men. It is nonpartisan on candidates and parties, but after studying issues, it comes to an agreement to advocate for those issues. The League encourages citizens' participation in voting issues and voting. Lynn Community Television asked to collaborate with the League of Women Voters of Marblehead to have a forum for the candidates running for the 8th District of the Massachusetts House of Representatives. We have been so pleased to work with them.
All right, thank you, Lee, for those remarks. And let's go over some of these rules before we get started. All right, so here are the rules. We're going to go into questions. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer a question. The time will start with the new candidate. We have our time over here. Ms. Lee Mondale. Yellow, 30 seconds. Red, 15 seconds. No, I'm sorry. Yellow is 15 seconds. Red is to stop. Don't mind me. You all been through this before, and there are no opening statements, but each candidate will have 2 minutes for closing remarks at the end. So with that, I'm ready. Are y'all ready? Ready. Yes. All right, and Jenny will be first, and she'll start the first round of questions. So our first question is, what are your short-term and long-term goals to support coastal areas at risk from climate change?
Well, first I want to say thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you for having us, League and Lynn Community Television. We are a district on the coast. And so we have got special joys and special burdens. Thankfully, the state has a roadmap for net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. The legislature just passed a bill with next steps for getting us there. But we on the coast have got to pay special attention to the damage that's already been done. And that means securing our coastline with structures that are in need of repair right now from rising seas and brutal storms, building new structures, and trying options, new creative options, like the living reef people are talking about in Swampscott. That is the short term, securing what we already have. Meanwhile, we have to be working very hard to clean the grid, build a better building code, and electrify our public transportation, and incentivize for electric vehicle purchase. And that will all, again, get us down the road quickly, hopefully, to 2050, if not before.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Polly Titcomb. Some of the short-term goals that I would have to combat climate change, and particularly on the coastline, is definitely it sounds really basic, but I live in Swampscott. I walk the Lynn coastline all the time, and in that area in particular, Marblehead has more of a natural coastline in a lot of places, whereas the Lynn and Swampscott coastline is infrastructure, and it has retaining walls that are already in compromised position. So one of the things in the short term that I would definitely look to do is to continue to secure state funding, increase state funding to provide general maintenance to those walls, because if we can't in the immediate future even protect the resources that we have, then we're really not setting ourselves up for more investment in coastal resiliency in the future. Toward that end, in terms of more longer term goals, I think the state is going to have to really invest in a lot of research in terms of how coastal communities, how bad, we're going to have to face the music, how bad climate change really is going to be, what the timeline looks like, what some of the sustainability initiatives are, grant funding for new ideas and new innovations that are meant to, lower the storm surges, and then some of the bigger projects of even possibly raising up the areas along the coastline. So it's going to take a lot of state support and funding, and just getting really serious about the problem and making sure that there's a very serious investment in the research and data around what's needed there.
And Doug, you are up.
Hi, my name's Doug Thompson. I also want to thank Lynn TV and the League of Women Voters for having us tonight. And I'm really glad this is the first question because it's such a pressing issue here in this district, of course. And I'm very pleased to talk about it. I've been endorsed by many of the leading climate activists and environmentalists in this district, having just recently received endorsement from 350 Mass Action, leading North Shore climate activist group. And I agree with my fellow candidates about some of what needs to happen. But I think ultimately, while we may have similarities in what we think needs to happen, the question will really be about who has the capability of being a leader within the House to drive these issues forward. People, as I've noted, that are passionate about this issue have looked at the various candidates and found me to be the one with the most detailed and boldest plan. To that end, I have a plan that calls for getting to net zero by 2035, which is faster than what the state right now expects to hit, a little bit faster than sustainable Marblehead. But I think with technology developments and some further investments, this is very doable. I have a very detailed plan at dougforrep.com, and I look forward to discussing this issue more. We definitely need to address both transportation, power sources, and buildings, and making major investments to help people make the transition. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diann Baylis, and I want to thank everybody here for putting this together. So we are in a coastal district, so there's no greater threat to our quality of life and our local economy than climate change. So we need to address this problem with urgency. I mean, I grew up on the Merrimack River. My father was harbor master. He had a riverboat. He went up and down the river all the time. I grew up with that understanding how important the river was to the city of Haverhill and to its economy and to its fishing and tourism. But I see similarities here in how important in this region the impact is on the district's economy and the quality of life. I hope to get on the committee on global warming and climate change because I really believe this is the most important thing for our future, our children and everyone else. We need to accelerate transition to clean energy with getting us off fossil fuels and transmission to 100% clean energy and electrical generation by 2035 and how we heat our buildings. And then transportation sector, 2045, consistent with the goals put forward by the Mass Climate Action Network. And we need to seize environmental and economic opportunities presented by offshore wind. We need stronger incentives for purchase of electric vehicles and more charging stations. And I have to say, we were lucky enough to meet with a group last week and told us and we realized the important work of the Swampscott Harbor and Waterfront Commission to protect and preserve Swampscott Harbor through construction of an artificial reef. So I will champion both of these projects.
Tristan.
Well, thank you so much, Mukala. Thank you so much to everyone for coming tonight. Thank you, Lynn Community Television and the Marblehead League of Women Voters. Climate and the environment is my #1 issue, and I've always said that. As was noted, we are an entirely coastal district, which means we are unfortunately in a unique position where we are particularly threatened by the climate crisis. In the short term, we have to work on adaptation. We're past the point of prevention. That means shoring up seawalls. That means building up our harbor and giving it upgrades. And it means securing that money from the state and being able to make the case that the state needs to take an active role in this. That's the role of the state representative. That's delivering for the district, being able to articulate and advocate these needs at the state level. Now, for my long-term goals, I'd like to distinguish myself a little bit from what my colleagues had mentioned and say that my big focus is on our public transportation. I don't think we're at the point yet where electric cars are really accessible enough to everyone, logistically speaking, whether it's charging stations around or charging stations at homes, that electric cars are the answer yet. We have an obligation and an opportunity to bring a 21st century, efficient, reliable, green public transportation system to the North Shore, and that's something we absolutely should do. Additionally, let's make sure that as we transition to this green economy, we do everything we can to bring these new jobs in emerging industries to the North Shore so that we can all share in the prosperity of our new green economy.
Terri.
Hi. Excuse me. My name is Terri Tauro. I'm also running for state rep in the 8th Essex District. Thank you, everyone, for this forum. It's a great way to connect with everybody. I'm the department administrator for the Harbor Master in Marblehead, so I'm really familiar with what's happening on our ocean front. My short-term plan is I've been involved in Clean Water Act pump-out facility in Marblehead Harbor. I have been involved in the shrink wrap recycling. I'm trying to get a clean marina rating for our marina down at the waterfront. And desperately trying to find funding for solar docks. So in the short term, I think if everybody pitches in and does things like that, that is going to be very helpful. Transitioning into the long term, I was speaking to a couple of auto mechanics the other day, and they simply can't afford and don't know how to even work on electric cars. So I think we really need to have an intentional plan for this. We can't move to green energy at the expense of our economy and at the expense of our workers. So we have to, that would be something that we really need to secure is training for the workers. The small businesses need to have funding to outfit themselves and to train to fix these, the electric cars and even the electric transportation if we go in that direction, which I think we need to. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for those responses. All right, we're on to question number 2, and Polly will be leading off this one. Question is, what is your top priority for each of the 3 communities you will be representing?
It's a great question. So I view our communities as a district, and while there are significant differences between the communities, and I think that deserves acknowledgement, I would definitely be looking to, there's enough substantive issues that we can address in an overarching respect that I think we can categorize all the 3 issues as the same for each community. So my top priorities for each of the communities or our district as a whole would be combating climate change, of course, starting to address the housing crisis, mitigating the housing crisis, and of course, improving transportation infrastructure. I mean, I think we've all talked about this. The MBTA and our public transportation system is at a critical juncture. And as is climate change, I mean, we are really facing critical issues. Mitigating the housing crisis, there's 1 in 345 residents of Massachusetts is experiencing homelessness, 20,000 people on any given night. These are serious issues that need to be addressed in our district to help solve the issues, but also in the area. And then, of course, education is tied to that as well, and ensuring that the districts get adequate funding for education. And there's a lot more I can say about that that will help to change the outlook of the future for our citizens and help to work toward those other issues and find resolutions for those as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. The 3 issues that I would prioritize are, 1, I think affordability in general is very important across the district, has differential impacts, obviously, in different communities. Climate change, as we discussed already, and underlying all of this is the power of special interests and the inability to be able to move anything forward, I think has to be a fundamental issue that affects everything that we might talk about here tonight. So on affordability, 2 biggest pieces of that I know people are very concerned about are housing and healthcare. And I hope we'll have a chance to get into both of those issues in more detail. The climate we've talked about, there's a very particular issue, of course, in terms of Kings Beach and the cleaning up of Kings Beach that is very central here, obviously in Lynn and Swampscott in particular. But there are, those issues about climate that we talked about before are relevant across the communities. And then special interests. And we need to be able to ensure that your next representative is actually not beholden to any special interests so that they can actually be moving these issues forward and not have interference from any kind of lobbyist contributions that they've received.
Well, there are issues that are common to all 3 communities, such as climate change, but its impact will have impact on our coastline in different ways. All 3 communities face challenges with housing affordability. There's unique local issues. Example is the need for state support in cleaning up Kings Beach in Lynn and Swampscott. And I just mentioned the important work of the Swampscott Harbor and Waterfront Commission. They want to protect and preserve the harbor through construction of an artificial reef. So I will champion these projects. Also, there's areas of difference. Example, education being, we need an education aid formula that's fair to both urban and suburban districts. But a diverse urban school system like Lynn faces different and greater challenges that require advocacy from a state legislator. Transportation is an issue, but it's clear that Lynn faces a full-on transportation problem for the coming years. It could be 3 years. And the residents of the city, they're going to need a great deal of focus from their state legislative delegation, creative thinking. For example, I want to bring back the ferry service from Lynn to Boston. We have to take advantage of the ready-to-go terminal that we already have that exists. Economic development issues are also different in these communities. Workforce development needs to focus throughout the district, and I believe Lynn has the opportunity to become a destination for companies in the life sciences and other growth sectors in our economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Mukala. Thank you so much for this question, because I think it's extremely important that whoever is the next state representative recognizes that these three communities, although they are one district, have distinct issues. So for me, Marblehead's top issue that I will fight for is climate resiliency, as we all just discussed in the first question. But it's particularly poignant in Marblehead as an entirely seaside community because their municipal power grid is located very close to the harbor. Energy and climate change have always been linked, but I'm sure that people didn't think it would go this way. That's why, for me, coastal resiliency is the top priority for Marblehead. For Swampscott, it's housing. I think we're in a very close place to pricing out an entire generation from being able to move to Swampscott. Swampscott has very little buildable land left. And if we have development come in that does that land, that develops on that land, it's extremely important that affordability and affordable housing is included in that. And the state needs to do more to incentivize that sort of development. And for Lynn, to me, it's education. I'm an educator with deep experience. I'm somebody who taught on Zoom during COVID-19. Lynn is a diverse urban school district, and it has different needs from the other two communities in this district. We need to make sure we're focusing on ELL students, as well as ensuring that following the platform left behind by Dr. Tutwiler, who we will miss greatly, that we're increasing the presence of social workers in schools to ensure that our students are being fully supported in all aspects of life. We don't need to raise MCAS scores like the Board of Education recently did.
Okay, so Lynn for me is education. I am a union leader and I stood on the picket line for the Lynn teachers at least 3 times. They have endorsed me through AFT Mass. And I talked to them and you know, their classrooms have 40 students in them. Out of those 40 students, there may be, 4 different languages. Their teachers are jumping back and forth from classroom to classroom, trying to interpret for the rest of the teachers. So, we really need to get that Student Opportunity Act funding to the Lynn schools and, the fair share, obviously pass the Fair Share Amendment too, to bring some more funding into those school systems. For Marblehead, that's my hometown, and I've been fighting tooth and nail for decades for transparency in the government. Marblehead has had some really bad years with money being spent places that it shouldn't have been spent in. It's been earmarked at town meeting for certain things, and then it ends up somewhere else, even though we voted at town meeting. I think Swampscott is having similar issues with transparency in government, but I also see a real need for more focus on the senior housing in Swampscott. Some of the seniors are really afraid that they're going to get relocated. And when you have raised your children, grown up, raised your children, worked and lived in a community, you should be able to stay in that community. You've earned the right to stay there. Thank you.
I actually, for all the differences in the communities, from a state rep perspective, I really see more commonalities. And folks here have already touched on some of them. Clearly, it's climate change. In Lynn and in Swampscott, we've got the Kings Beach problem, which we will work on, we will clean up. It is, finally, I think everyone is rowing in the same direction on that issue, and that's going to help us tremendously with the federal government and with the state government in getting funding to solve this problem. I think education is the next issue. I have a rising junior in my house. We have lived with the impact of the pandemic, and I've seen it, I've lived it. We need to get more academic and social emotional supports for students at every level. The state needs to take a more active role in understanding that the cities and towns are cash-strapped and need additional help in making this happen. And finally, the affordability issue is huge in all three communities, especially for seniors, as Terri just said, people who desperately want to stay in their homes. The state can explore things like regular boosts in the senior circuit breaker. So there are definitely things that can be done. I want to just say, importantly, it requires a state rep who will provide accessible, engaged leadership, who will be in the community talking to people and finding out what the needs are. Thank you.
Thank you for those responses. And we move on to question number 3. Doug will lead off with this one. This question is, how will you work with communities in the 8th Essex District in regards to 40B, 40R, and other zoning regulations in regards to development near areas of transit?
This is a great question. Thank you very much for that. Housing, as we've been talking about, is a major, major issue across all three of these communities. And sometimes people think that Lynn doesn't necessarily have an affordable housing problem, but it absolutely does. Maybe a little above the 10% threshold, but it definitely has challenges in that regard as well, with many, many renters and homeowners not being able to afford to stay in Lynn. So 40B is tied into a much larger housing problem, and we need more housing, period, at many different levels, supply and demand. And in particular, what we need to do is take matters into our own hands. And if we all move forward as the mayor has here and the city council has here in Lynn to start to establish an affordable housing trust, as exists in the other communities, that can help with affordable housing production. We need to think about places like Vinnon Square. What are the opportunities for more affordable housing development there that's along a transit corridor that's integrated with housing and commercial area and transit? We need to be thinking about that in terms of former schools like the Coffin School or the Hadley School. We need to be thinking about a lot of different innovative ideas to address our housing challenges. And if we do that, then we won't be subject to 40B. I don't think anyone really dreams of being subject to 40B, and we need to be moving forward with other innovative approaches to take matters into our own hands. Thank you.
Well, great question. Housing availability is a challenge throughout the whole district. And throughout the state, and as we know for the last forum, that the median price right now in Greater Boston is $900,000. So it kind of takes away from the American dream. And as Doug said, it is one of supply and demand. Demand is going up, supply is going down. And I believe that every community needs to do its part. So Chapter 40B plays a role, and it's a great tool. But developable land in our district is hard to find. So one thing we can do is expand zoning for in-law apartments, which would help elderly people stay in their homes in this district. I'm a strong supporter of incentivizing development of housing near public transit. Housing is so expensive anyway, so, some people can't afford a car as well. And it also connects to my focus where, if we don't have a good public transit system, then this doesn't work at all. So that will be another question. But we also needed to support the work of the regional community developed corporations and our local housing authorities. These organizations are taking the lead in helping connect people with housing options. For example, the Lynn Housing Authority has provided nearly $50 million in housing support to more than 5,300 families through emergency COVID aid. And while rental units are important, we need to have models that help renters save for a down payment on a home. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's such an important question, our housing crisis and how we're going to address it. I appreciate and fully support the efforts of Mayor Nicholson to increase inclusionary zoning in the city of Lynn. But it's very important that the state has a role to play in this as well, so that inclusionary zoning, which requires a certain percentage of units be set aside affordable, doesn't dismay or completely destroy any development coming to the city. The state needs to play a role in this. I've said from the beginning that housing is a statewide issue that's dealt with on the municipal level. I'm proud of the fact that just this week I was endorsed by the Massachusetts Housing Coalition, a nonprofit that's dedicated to improving the housing stock in Massachusetts through collaborative efforts in the State House. They saw the types of initiatives that I would put forward as a state representative to make sure that the state is meeting our municipalities where they need to be to ensure that development isn't completely stopped. One aspect of housing that I don't think we discuss enough as well is our public housing. Thousands of people rely on public housing right now, and thousands more are on wait lists. Having met with people who live in public housing in the district, I feel that we very desperately need to improve our existing stock of public housing and ensure that the amenities are livable. And then I think we have an opportunity to dramatically increase our public housing stock to help those people who are on waiting lists right now and beyond.
Okay, well, I grew up in public housing. I grew up on Barnard Hawks Court in Marblehead. So I understand the stigma. I understand the struggles for people in public housing. And, you know, I've been talking to, as I said before, to the seniors. At this point, has everyone heard that term, not in my backyard? That's what's happening right now. More so in Swampscott and Marblehead. Every time a developer is introducing a plan to the neighborhoods are arguing and the people are getting up in arms. My property values are going to go down. So I think that the state needs to force these municipalities and cities into a position where it's not just, you need 10% housing. It's more like, listen, get your stuff together and figure out what's going to work in your town. You know, find ways to make these public housing units or just affordable housing units aesthetically fit in your community so that we can move forward with this. It's all about the people, and it starts with the people, and we have to convince the people that this is right for them for it to ever work on a state level or on a municipal level. So, you know, the senior housing is really important in if we cooperate and collaborate in our towns, in our cities, to do what's right for our specific places, then we won't have to fall subject to 40B. We'll be making our own choices.
You know, in June, before school got out, I had the privilege of going to KIPP Academy and serving as a judge for the AP history student presentations. And I was struck by the fact that 3 students in this class did their projects on affordable housing because they're experiencing such a jump in rents in their neighborhoods that they're seeing families moving out and they're panicking. Housing is one of these issues that's it's incredibly frustrating because it takes time. It takes time to locate opportunity, it takes time to build, to get it through the zoning process, and it takes time to build it. Never mind the lawsuits that happen around tools like 40B. So the long term is frustrating, but while we're working on that, there are things we can do in the short term. For instance, one tool that the state can use to solve a piece of this problem, relatively easy, is boosting the current deeds excise tax when people sell their property. So the state can give towns and cities permission to boost this tax. Our rate is currently among the lowest in the country and certainly lower than our neighbors. Now, this money can go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It can go into the Housing Preservation and Stabilization Fund, and all of that can create and preserve housing for working class families, and for very low income families, you can provide housing vouchers and rental assistance.
Great, thanks. Pardon me. With respect to the existing tools of the 40B and 40R, I feel municipalities already have those at their disposal, and they have proven to be not as effective as the legislature intended when they were passed. often 40B is a way around the size of a development, and as much as it adds to affordability, which these days isn't even really affordable, it also adds to, regular market rate housing. So it doesn't really solve an underlying problem in my view. It doesn't mitigate the problem enough. And 40R is just a tool that Swampscott's had, and it's just been very underutilized. And adopting new 40R areas has proven to be something that becomes like a NIMBY, not in my backyard. So. I think with respect to other zoning and near transits, the community zoning guidelines has been great. That just came down recently from the legislature. That's the type of directive that communities need. Like, you need to figure out a way to create a zoning bylaw that allows multifamily by right within a certain amount of public area from public transit. We have to take that type of directive with communities. There's 3 housing issues: amount of housing, variety of housing, and poverty. And those are the causes of housing insecurity. And we are at a unique spot right now with COVID. COVID exposed these disparities more than ever. But we also have these ARPA funds. 9 billion of these funds are in flex accounts that the municipalities can spend on things such as housing, building additional housing, vouchers and such. And seniors, senior housing, veteran housing, all of that. And I will stop there. There's a lot more to say, but I think we need to use those funds.
Thank you all for those. And we are on to question number 4. And yeah, I think you all will love this one. The pollution discharge at Kings Beach has been damaging a beautiful natural resource of Lynn and Swampscott for years. How will you use your position to implement structural changes and improvements to resolve this issue? And are there funding opportunities to offset the considerable cost associated with this effort? Diann?
Hi. Well, like I talked about before, this coastal district, it's very important because it's very tied to our regional economy and to our quality of life. Now, with Kings Beach, I'm a surfer, and I know, this is a beautiful area. We have so many resources, and to have Kings Beach like that, it's something that has to be changed. So I commend Representative Lori Ehrlich and Senator Creighton last year for getting $5 million to start up the cleanup of Kings Beach. But that's a great start. But the people in Boston need to know that this is really important to us still, and it's going to take a lot more money to do this. And I think that, the town of Swampscott and the city of Lynn, they've done their part in trying to fix their pipes and go through all of that process, a very expensive process. But they're going to need state funds. There's no doubt about it. I mean, they're not going to get through this without the state paying attention to the problem that we have. And like I said, this is a great place. We have a lot of opportunity for great jobs and our regional economy, but we have to take this very seriously.
Well, due to decades of inaction from our state, Kings Beach is, by some measures, the most, and by other measures, the second most, dirtiest beach in the Commonwealth. It is so important that whatever comes out of the engineering study that Representative Ehrlich and Senator Creighton received state funds or secured state funds to put into place, whatever number comes out of that, whether it's $20 million, $30 million, $40 million, whatever it's going to cost to clean up Kings Beach, ultimately, whatever the solution is, it's important that this next state rep in this seat understands that this is a state issue, and we have to make that case. It affects 2 different municipalities, one with a city government, one with a town government, very different structures. The ocean itself doesn't have a zip code. The pollution ebbs and flows with the tides, sometimes more down at the Lynn side, sometimes more in Swampscott. And the pipe itself is controlled by DCR. That's the state. The fact of the matter is, no matter what comes out of this engineering study, whatever the solution is, this state representative has to be ready to take that to the State House and say, this is a state issue and we need state funding with it.
Okay, Kings Beach, that is the big topic of the night, I think. I've got experience with FEMA money and federal funding, federal grants. So I think that this is going to, we're talking about a health issue, an environmental justice issue, and I think it's going to take more than just state funding. I think we're going to have to tap into every single funding possibility there is, including federal grants and FEMA money. There's flooding inland from Kings Beach. I was talking to some people that live near Kiley Park, and there's like a running river that goes under their houses. When you look at the drainage sewer, the drain sewer, I guess it's called, I don't know. There's actually a flowing river, and this was like in the middle of a time when it had been 100 degrees for 2 weeks. So, you know, there's a lot of issues down there, and it's going to take a lot of money. It would be great if we could do something as fantastic as the project in Dorchester and South Boston that cleaned up the South Boston beaches. It took 30 years and, you know, billions of dollars, but those beaches are now the cleanest in the state. You know, it's a big project, and it's going to take a lot of coalition building and collaboration with state, local, federal, everything. So the state rep has to be a collaborator and a negotiator and get this done for us. Thank you.
Terry's absolutely right. This is a federal issue as well as a state issue. When I worked on Capitol Hill, one of our tasks was to make sure that projects in our district were getting attention and getting funding. So the job of this state rep is to work with our federal delegation, work with the governor and the state, and turn over every conceivable rock to find the funding to get this job done. Like I said earlier, I am greatly encouraged by the fact that everyone seems to be finally rowing in the same direction. There is tremendous leadership at every level, and that is what's going to make the difference in convincing funders like the federal government or even private funders that they can trust us with their money. And that, you know, you look at an environmental justice issue like this is the only beach for 100,000 people. The fact that it is the second or the first dirtiest is shocking. And we can make an absolute case on many levels to get the job done here.
Thank you. Yes, as others have indicated, we were lucky enough to get $5.3 million from our past representative and current senator for an engineering study and to look into the outflow problem. But what I will say is, I've been on the Swampscott Select Board from 2019 to just this past April, and on the Finance Committee prior to that. And during most of that time, we were dealing with the decree that was issued to the town to invest a certain amount per year to mitigate this problem. In that process, we had secured a grant in about 2017 to look into the issue. And it turns out, you know, there's over 100 miles of piping underground in Swampscott alone that needs to be looked at. And as it turns out from the outflow, at the point of the outflow, 3% is coming from Lynn, 16% of the contamination is coming from Swampscott, and combined on the beach, it's about 21%. So it's a mix, and even though the percentages are different, the reality is if in Swampscott there's 100 miles under the ground in pipes, we can only imagine what there is in Lynn to investigate to see what comes out there. So the studies have shown that we've done in Swampscott that 80% are just old infrastructure. This is 1890s and later, but not much later when the piping was laid. So we're looking at $20 million for the towns, $50 million for Lynn, and Swampscott has been responsible in doing that, but it's nothing the municipality can afford, and the state needs to step up and fight more. And I have had experience doing that, and I'll continue to do that. And like everyone else said too, legislatures also need to turn to the federal government and fight for funding from there too. Thanks.
All right, well, it'd probably be easier for everyone if I just said ditto at this point. It's always fun going 6 on these questions. So let me say something really novel. We need more money from the federal government. In all seriousness, I do think that everyone else has provided a great background on what the issues are here. And it's kind of an accident of history that the Kings Beach situation is an isolated issue from the rest of the Boston Harbor cleanup. It was kind of a decision made to kind of draw the line at the Nahant Causeway. And really, this should have been taken care of when all of Boston Harbor was cleaned up. And that kind of just gives you a sense of the scope of this. Everyone's talked about the complexities involved here. And this really needs to be a joint effort, local communities, state, federal government. I know our Congressman Moulton has been involved with it. I know the mayor here in Lynn has been definitely focused on it. The Ward 3 Councilor Coco Ellensung has been involved with it. We need to make sure that our senators, Markey and Warren, are engaged in this issue because this is what it's going to take. And probably, as we've all been kind of educated about as well, there's a Kings Beach issue, and then, there's a, Swampscott Fisherman's Beach issue, and then there's Marblehead coastline issues. And all of these things are going to cost, significant amounts of money. We're going to have to work collaboratively with other people in the legislature, with our communities, of course, and with federal representatives to make sure that we actually bring this issue to closure. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are moving along. We're at question number 5. Tristan will start this one off. So what will be your number 1 legislative priority when it comes to education? And please be as specific as possible.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I'm really glad that I'm able to answer this question. As I've mentioned, I am an educator. Education runs a very deep experience in education. For me, my number 1 priority will be focusing on students' mental health. Now, recently we had the legislature passed a very comprehensive mental health bill, which among it includes creating a student task force to ensure that students' mental health is being taken care of. And what I love the most about it is that 1/3 of the members of this task force are going to be students. We're teaching students how to advocate for themselves. We're teaching students these real-world issues of how to talk about your feelings and talk about what you need. I think that's extremely important. When it comes to education, I think we need to shift our focus a little bit, especially coming out of COVID. Of course, reading, writing, and arithmetic are all extremely important. But we have to make sure that that focus is on students' well-being, especially for our younger students in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, who may not have that social and emotional learning that may have been stunted from the COVID-19 pandemic and going online suddenly. So that is my top priority for for education, certainly focusing on mental health.
I love this question because I've put a lot of thought into this. I truly believe that our students need more choices. I don't think that every kid needs to go to college. I know that these kids are stressed out my own daughter suffers from anxiety and was on an IEP. Sorry, Bridget, if you didn't want me to say that. Anybody? She's 18, she can kill me later. But anyway, the trade schools they're a great option. Lynn Tech is a fabulous place, but not everybody can go there. Essex Aggie is a fabulous place, not everyone can go there. I think we need a laser focus in the schools on, a guidance counselor should be saying, what do you want to do? Not what school do you want to go to? I mean, these kids are feeling like if they want to be a beautician or they want to work in construction, that they're losers. Well, that's not true. We need communities filled with skilled laborers, tradespeople, and college grads. It's a collaboration, and not everybody is meant to do everything. So, I would like to focus on that, and even through the unions, they have paid apprenticeships. Kids can go get a job and learn a trade while they're able to still support themselves and maybe their families if they're helping to support their families. So a lot of people are not taking advantage of that. I want to bring awareness to that. and just get some choices for these kids in the education system moving forward so that they can be who they want to be and who they're capable of being and what they're good at. Thank you.
You know, I refuse to write off a generation of kids as not having received the education they deserve because they happen to be born at the wrong time. We have to face the academic, the emotional, and the social challenges exacerbated by the pandemic. So my priority is bridging the gaps and building the skills that have been lost. Too many students are not working at grade level. They understandably fell behind during remote learning, and they have yet to catch up. Many are trying to overcome the mental and emotional challenges that others have mentioned, and it's making it difficult for them to even access learning. On top of that, cities and town budgets, as I mentioned earlier, have been pushed to their limits. They need help from state government, and especially if this help is going to be delivered equitably. So when I'm on the doors, I talk to people about what I call COVID recovery for kids. It could include additional adjustment counselors in the schools, professional development for teachers, academic specialists, community-based and school-based activities, especially for our younger kids. And of course, we also need quality, affordable daycare and early education. The pandemic certainly exposed the fault lines. We knew that inequality starts before kindergarten. Well, with the pandemic, we know for sure.
Thanks. I'll just go really broad with my number one priority, which is increasing funding to education, so I can fit everything under this umbrella here. I think we need to increase funding for special education. It's an unpredictable and growing expense for municipalities. As I've said before, I have the utmost respect for the teachers and the municipalities dealing with this. We should, we must, and we should want to service these children. But it's a burden on municipalities that they can't sustain alone and while maintaining the schools and infrastructure and everything. So that's one. Transportation reimbursement funding for out-of-district children. That is a gigantic expense for communities, and it's not reimbursed at all or very minimally by the state. Chapter 70 funding needs to get up to speed. It is better, especially with this new budget, FY23 budget, but it's not. We can't wait till 2027 to address that in full. And I really like what Terri said about the career and technical education. That population of students going there, I think it's fantastic. I hope my child wants to go there. Lynn Tech, Essex Aggie, but the municipalities aren't getting reimbursed for the number of students going to those schools. And so it's actually costing municipalities for this amazing opportunity. There's also discriminatory acceptance practices that are subtle but there, and that's negatively impacting more diverse communities such as Lynn to accessing that and early education and so much more. And ARPA funds, again, and the Fair Share Amendment would help to address that. Sorry, had to squeeze it in.
Well, I thought I had something useful to add to this conversation, but Polly just took my last piece. So much of this is about funding. There's obviously additional pieces to the challenges that we have in our educational system, but the funding piece is huge. Fair Share Amendment, for those of you that may not be aware, is on the ballot in November. It's a reasonable increase in the tax on people with incomes over $1 million. And half about of that additional revenue, about $1.5 billion, will go to education and half to transportation. And everyone here has commented on the various needs that there are. I totally agree that we need to be investing in all of our children. Those that need kind of more standard educational pathway, those that need special education services, those that are gifted. We need to be meeting every child where they're at. Particularly, people have emphasized early education. There's been some progress with the legislature in addressing the crisis we have there this year. More needs to be done. There's a long-term issue, particularly in higher education or pathways after K through 12. The defunding of that is a real problem that needs to be addressed. It's been going down over the last 30 years, and it's creating barriers for kids that want to go to college or to trade schools not having the funding available to be able to do that. Thank you.
Well, we have 4 kids, and they've all been educated in the public schools, and my youngest is going into the 6th grade at Village. Education is a top priority. Every year when the state budget comes around, we have to fully fund the 2019 Student Opportunity Act and ensure that education aid funding formula is fair to both urban and suburban districts. Now, I've gone to a lot of doors. I've met a lot of great people. I've talked to a lot of therapists. I've talked to a lot of teachers. And they have been very clear that we need to help the kids get past COVID and the fear with this epidemic of gun violence. They suggest more counselors on staff, which I really agree with. Unfortunately, they say that, say a kid is in an IEP class, they have only so many counselors, and they say, well, maybe you could get a private one, but you can't get a private one right now. It's just the access to counseling for kids is just really bad inside and out of school. And we really need these counselors to get these kids past COVID. And I want to have more incentives for people to go into the profession of social work and counseling by having grants and maybe, tuition, put aside or something that would give them the reason to want to help these kids. And I also, I agree with Terri about STEM programs. My kid went to Essex Tech, and I think it's a great thing to help with our workforce development in this area.
All righty, and we are moving along. This is going by fast. Thank you guys all giving some great answers. All right, we are on question number 6. Terri, you were leading off this question. All right, so with the Lynn VA potentially closing and the loss of nearby services, how would you advocate for veterans in the district?
Well, first of all, we should not close the Lynn VA. It's imperative to the citizens of Lynn to have that. Veterans served our country, and they gave up their lives sometimes, or they gave up their health on many occasions. My father was a 15-year veteran of the U.S. Air Force, and he died of what we think was a leukemia caused by exposure to the hydrogen bomb. He was in Operation Ivy. So VA's, this VA center is paramount. The people in Lynn should not have to travel to Chelsea for this. I actually was going to stand on the line with them. I know that a bunch of the seniors and the veterans in Lynn were standing up for every Tuesday, I think it was, or every Thursday at 1 o'clock. They were protesting outside to not close the VA. And I know there's been a stay of execution on that. So we just have to keep fighting and keep advocating and make sure that we get to Congressman Moulton, who we know is a veteran himself. And just that VA cannot close. Lynn needs it, and it has to stay, and I will do everything, including stand on the line with all of you, because nothing better to me than a good action. So I'll be there with you, and I will fight and advocate for you. I'm ferocious, trust me.
I'll be with Terri. She's absolutely right. We need to keep the Lynn VA going. My dad was a veteran. He was in the Army Air Corps during World War II. And his identity as a veteran was one of the most important things in his entire life. These VAs are not just centers of healthcare, they're centers of community, and they're centers of memory for the people who served our country. Lynn needs and deserves this center. At the end of the day, healthcare is a human right. And in Massachusetts, we have a situation where all but probably 2.5% of the population is covered by some form of insurance. But a lot of that insurance comes with crippling cost sharing. And that could be copays, deductibles, coinsurance. Health insurance premiums in Massachusetts have tripled in the last 19 years. Places like the VA provide good, solid care to a population that desperately needs it in a very unpredictable marketplace.
Thank you. As Terri and Jenny said, I strongly believe that the Lynn VA should not close. With respect to veteran services, there should be no discussion other than an increase in services just across the board. We are already not doing enough for veterans, and we certainly should not compromise that support any more than it is. Regionalization, I know that Swampscott and Lynn share some veteran services, is a great option. It can't be the only option, and we just need to increase those services. When in the past years, when I've been serving in Swampscott on the board and particularly on the board, the Veterans Center, it was the VFW, became the Veterans Center. Lots of types of veterans came together to change the name and show their collaboration and increase their advocacy, which I think is fantastic. And they came and shared what they were upset about and why about what the town wasn't doing. And these concerns were completely legitimate, and many of them are still standing, and where town needs to continue to try to resolve those. But again, that's what I would do to try to find out what the needs are, is by meeting with the veterans themselves in their community support. I think you're right, they are centers of community, and that's critical. And again, increasing access to helping with applications, health insurance, legal services, housing, computer access, all of these things need to be present and increased for the VAs, including in Lynn.
I agree. The Lynn VA definitely should not close. My dad was also a vet in the Navy. And this is a very unique population. I've spent my career in healthcare and working with many, many vets over those years, and hearing deeply from them about how meaningful the services they receive at veterans hospitals or community centers are, and how different the care is compared to getting it at just a generic healthcare facility because of their unique needs, as people have talked about. So we need to make sure that we're working in collaboration. This is in some ways more of a federal issue, collaboration with our federal delegation to support them, to ensure that while there might be some master plan in Washington about consolidation or efficiencies, that this is not the place for that, and that we're going to stand on the line or in working in offices with our federal counterparts to make sure that this does not come to pass. Thank you.
Well, I agree with everyone else. It definitely shouldn't close. My father was in the Coast Guard in World War II. Very proud of it. And I know how important the VA was to him. And like Jenny said, it was more than just a place where you got things that you needed. It is, they were very proud of this, and it was part of their network. My father was very involved in veteran activities. The biggest event in our family was the Christmas parade that the Haverhill vets put together every year to raise money. And it was wonderful. We saw what happened in these vet hospitals during COVID, but we need them. We need, with public transportation being so bad, how are these elderly people supposed to get to other centers? They don't always have family or friends to take them. And also, you know, and I just see overall, those who served should get quality health care. They deserve that. I mean, I've talked about this before, but my parents were both in rest homes, and the quality of health care was terrible. I remember when my father was dying, we have a family of 9, and all my siblings helped out, thank God. And I remember seeing an old friend at the rest home one night, and she said, she's a nurse. And I said, oh, I didn't know you were a nurse here. She said, no, I'm not a nurse here. I'm hired privately to oversee these people. And you're very lucky not to have to hire someone, and that's just not fair.
Well, this is an extremely important issue, and I refuse to pass it off as more of a federal issue, because there are things that we can do at the state level. I was proud to stand out there with Mass Senior Action and Pam Edwards and her crew on one of the Fridays outside of the Lynn VA. We need to keep the Lynn VA open, and I do have faith in Congressman Moulton, who he himself, being a veteran, will deliver that for us. The legislature has recently made a few excellent positive moves in the right direction on Veterans Affairs. The first thing is changing the Secretary of Veterans Affairs from a sub-cabinet position to a cabinet position, which establishes a much more clear chain of command from the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to the governor. I was very, very happy to see that change made. Additionally, the comprehensive mental health bill that was passed includes several initiatives to address veteran suicide. And that's absolutely paramount, because veterans suffer from ailments such as PTSD at such a higher rate than the general population. We have to make sure that they're receiving that specialized care. But one of my meetings that I took as I've been doing across the communities to get a better feel for things, because I myself am not a veteran, is I sat down with the Marblehead Veterans Service Officer, David Rogers, and he gave me a really in-depth look at exactly what it is that municipal VSOs do. Beyond serving as taking care of all of the ceremonies, municipal VSOs are responsible for ensuring that veterans have access to their state and federal benefits and helping them with that as a point person. Let's increase our resources that we're giving to these municipal VSOs to ensure that our veterans are getting the benefits that they deserve and earned.
All right, thank you for those responses. Just 2 more questions to go. We're almost there. We are almost there. Time moves fast. All right, well, back to the beginning. We're back over here to Jenny. All right. The question is, as a state representative, what would be your approach to any legislation regarding the MBTA and transportation in our region?
You know, I was thinking about this quote from the late, great Paul Farmer. He attributed all the ills of the world to one notion, and that is that some lives are worth more than others. And it doesn't, you may not think of that in terms of transportation, but in this case I do, because I think public transit has been the poor relation of the transportation sector for too long. And I think what we're seeing with the MBTA now is a result of just incredible neglect and underfunding. And as it goes back to as people moved out into the suburbs and highways were built, the idea of public transit became more of, well, this is how poor people get to work, or this is how the working class gets to their doctor's appointments and their schools. And at the end of the day, transportation is central to our economic competitiveness, and we have got to view it that way. It is a fundamental public good, and it should not be cut and neglected. There are serious structural issues that need to be resolved at the MBTA. It could be that capital projects were moved over to the Department of Transportation. That's one option. I am not a transportation expert, but I think we need to put everything on the table to figure out what is the best way to move forward. I certainly think more funding is an option, and that's why I support the Fair Share Amendment.
All right. So I think that, it just comes down to an increased investment. The Fair Share Amendment would help to alleviate some of those extraordinary costs that we're facing. Again, some of the outside sections, of the FY23 budget do address some of the most pressing and I would say basic needs of the MBTA, just to keep it functioning without literally catching on fire. But that's really not enough. The infrastructure bond bill that was passed in recent months, I guess it's been longer than, anyway, that helps leverage federal aid. We needed to pass that in order to receive aid from the federal government. And so now we are able to receive that, and that is a huge assistance to the state. Clearly, we have enough of a liability there that we need all the help we can get from the federal government, and it does provide relief to the transportation improvements. I sound like a broken record, but I've really been amazed at $9 billion in flexible ARPA funds. This is an opportunity for us to just take a look ahead at the next few fiscal years and revisit our capital plan and put back in electrification of the rail. This would just be one phase, right? That was cut out, but for all electrification plan and capital plans, and we actually have some of the money available there to be able to start that process in earnest, and we need to do that.
Well, I think the current problems are just a symptom of a much bigger systemic, historic issue. We have the 46th worst transportation system in the country. I believe that we need to not only think about just the current repairs and improvements, but we need to think much bigger, much bolder. I suggest that we start to focus on a vision for the next 25 years. What does a modern transportation system look like? Look at Paris. Look at Hong Kong. These are places where, especially in Paris, that had an ancient system like we did, but made the investments and now has a beautiful, efficient, green system that is accessible to all. Our metropolis has grown. Hopefully the next governor, Maura Healey, has just put out a very detailed transportation plan in the last 24 hours. I wholeheartedly concur that this is a major issue and that we need to think much bigger, much more broadly than just a 5-year MBTA capital plan, which does have some electrification of the commuter rail, which we need to move forward on. Doesn't mean we're not going to do anything, but we need to be thinking about a massive investment over the next 25 years to have a world-class transportation system which will support our communities and our economy to make sure that there's mobility for people throughout all of our communities here on the North Shore to access all of the opportunity of this state. Thank you.
Well, I ride the T to work. I see this stuff happening. I see the frustration because I'm part of it, and we're dealing with never knowing if the train's going to show up and now actually fearing if it's going to catch on fire. People in this region deserve a safe, reliable, green, and modern public transportation system because that's what we pay for. It's critical to our regional economy. Instead, we have a crumbling system, belongs in a museum. I get off at the MBTA stop where that poor man was dragged at Broadway, and it's just devastating to think that, going into that station every day, something so bad could have happened. And it's unacceptable. We have a huge challenge ahead of us in Lynn. These repairs, when the Lynn station shuts down, these repairs could take 3 years. We really have to mitigate the situation. We need to get a boat. We need to get a ferry from Lynn to Boston. And that would be a big priority of mine as a state representative. And we need major investment in upgrading the MBTA so we can at least have a functional, safe, and reliable system up and running. And that's what we should do with some of the state surplus. And also infrastructure funding that we're receiving from the federal government. So we need to focus on a system more modern, accessible, and environmentally responsible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bukala, I believe the question was about how would you go about approaching these bills. And the first thing I would do is ensure collaboration among the fellow reps. I already have existing relationships with many of the state representatives and other elected officials in the area, and we are so fortunate that we have State Senator Brendan Crichton advocating for all of us. He is the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Transportation, and he has done an absolutely phenomenal job, most recently having secured $50 million in funding for electrification of the Newburyport-Rockport line, which will be in the transportation bond bill. I look forward to working with, hopefully, next Governor Maura Healey on ensuring that that bill is put out to bid so that that funding comes to fruition. So not only do I seek to work on collaboration with other representatives in the region to ensure that the North Shore speaks with one strong, unified voice, because we absolutely have a public transportation issue, but we also have to ensure that we're dealing with the reality that some people are still going to drive their cars. I'm hoping to take the lead on a huge undertaking to reform Bell Circle, a place where everyone watching this at home and here tonight has sat in traffic for many more minutes of our lives than we'd care to do. Additionally, we need to have the forward-thinking type of thinking to ensure that these shutdowns, while necessary now, never happen again. And that when we invest in our public transportation infrastructure, it's not a one-time thing, but part of a constant reinvestment that ensures that upkeep is something that's happening.
Well, I agree with Tristan about the North Shore delegation having to form a coalition and work together collaboratively. Actually, Pete Capano has endorsed me, and he and I have talked a lot about this, and he told me can't wait for me to be on the negotiating team with the Lynn delegation to go in there and use my skills on the MBTA. At this point, long term, obviously, we need a complete overhaul of the state, of the MBTA and our state transportation. We're basically a third world country. I agree with Doug. I said it last week at the forum a couple weeks ago, the same thing. France, Europe, and China have these great transportation systems, and they're green. But for right now, we need to take care of the people in the district that are suffering now. The closures and the delays and the construction here and the construction there, it's nuts. We're getting $20 million to do something with the Linway. I say widen the left lane for the buses, put out shelters for people, and let's have nonstop shuttles during rush hour that go right to Wonderland. Just you get on that bus and go. You're not stopping while someone gets out to go to Walmart. The people that want the stops can come a little later in the day. 9 o'clock in the morning, something like that. But that would cut down significantly on the problems where we're trying to figure out where to get all this funding for this complete and utter overhaul that we desperately need in this state. But right now, we have to take care of the people on the ground. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. And we are down to our last question of the evening. Polly will be leading off this one. All right. Representative Lori Ehrlich worked with State Senator Brendan Crichton on a commission to study the decline of local news organizations. Would you have any interest in continuing that effort, and also would you support new ways of obtaining revenue for public, educational, and government media nonprofits now that cable revenue is on the decline?
That is can you just at least the second half, because they're two-part important, well, whatever anybody else wants, but there's two parts to the question, so.
All right. I'll repeat it. All right. Representative Lori Ehrlich worked with State Senator Brendan Crichton on a commission to study the decline of local news organizations. Would you have any interest in continuing that effort, and also would you support new ways of obtaining revenue for public, educational, and government media nonprofits now that cable revenue is on the decline?
Okay. Yes, I have to say I did not realize that Lori was on, that we had initiated or partook in that commission. So yes, it would be something that I definitely would be interested in. And in terms of the new ways of obtaining, can you just repeat what you, I'm sorry, I don't know if that
last part?
Yeah.
Okay. It said, would you have any interest in continuing the effort that Lori Ellick and Senator Crichton started? And also, would you support new ways of obtaining revenue for public, educational, and government media?
Yes, okay. I'm sorry. I don't know why I just wasn't like processing what you were saying there. Yes, absolutely. I would support new ways of obtaining what I think is PEG funding for municipalities. I think, it currently as it's set up, as the way I understand it, it's something that, it depends on the revenue that municipalities get or cities get from like Verizon and Comcast and such, and then some of it is from the state funding as well. But then because of the financial constraints of that, for example, Swampscott doesn't have the P of PEG, the public access channel, and I think that would be a huge community resource to be able to have that, but it's just a matter of weighing the priorities within financial constraints. So absolutely I would be interested in having and of finding new revenue sources for that public educational government access TV, and finding new solutions to keep that really important local and varied information sources to municipalities and cities.
Thank you for the question. I know this must be of particular interest to Lynn TV, and it is to these communities that get this valuable information source. And we are in an era where there's a real lack and decline in local news sources, and that's very, very critical. I think it's been critical to this race for there to be local news sources, and we've been fortunate to actually have some of them arise from the ashes in some ways here with Marblehead Beacon and the Marblehead News and other publications that are kind of coming into the vacuum. We definitely need to make sure that we have local news sources supported financially. Whether that's through the current revenue streams or new ones, since people are getting their news sources and streaming their access to communication, we should be looking at alternative funding streams to ensure that this community resource stays vital and strong and continues to support not only political news, but all types of community news that are important to the people here in Lynn, Swampscott, and Marblehead.
I would definitely support it. We need to continue to help the commission. We have to ensure local media. It's critical to accountability in our government, and we've talked about transparency at the state level. Well, we also need it at the local level. And I think it's wonderful in the last few months that we saw the birth of 3 new outlets, the Beacon, the Marblehead Beacon, and the Marblehead News, and the Marblehead, there's another one that I'm blanking on. But we need to support our cable stations. We need some accountability at the local level. People watch this stuff. It's something that we really need to maintain.
Well, I certainly think that local journalism is so important, and I think that everyone up here obviously agrees, especially given this race. This is exactly how, this is democracy in action. Having the opportunity to be streamed live to the communities that we're vying to represent is just paramount to being able, for our voters to be able to make an informed decision when they go to the ballot box. But as the question mentioned, there are declining cable revenues across the board, not just for local access, but for everyone. I think we need to take a look at charging streaming services and using that money to go towards our local access, as we did to the cable stations to ensure that they made space to share with us and ensure that we had a couple of local access channels. So I would certainly hope to follow Representative Ehrlich's lead in this sector.
Okay, yes, transparency and accountability in government. Without our local news sources, our newspapers, there is no accountability. There is no transparency. It's a checks and balances. That's why it's in the Constitution. You know, it's really, really important. As far as government funding, I don't know that I want to actually go there without a little bit more research on the subject. I think that could cause unintentional consequences. News outlets need to be free and unencumbered from you know, any reliability on government funds. You know, I'm sorry, we're going to cut your funds if you don't write a good story about the Speaker of the House, that type of thing. So I would have to look into that a little more before I have never actually considered the possibility of government funding for news outlets. While it's a really, it's definitely something that has to get done. These places have to stay open because our democracy depends on it. I think that needs a lot more looking into. Unintentional consequences are just worry me a little bit with that whole subject. Thank you.
I think without local news, you essentially have the fox in the hen house, because you need the independent watchdog going to government meetings, talking to people, reporting on it. You know, I've noticed a difference in our race from when I worked in politics in the 90s. The press was much more involved in the day-to-day coverage of even state rep races then. We are so fortunate, as everyone has said, that 3 different media outlets have been born just recently, and I think it testifies to the hunger that's out there. I love the idea of the charging streaming services, but we do have that model. We do have the Corporation for Public Broadcasting as a model which funds National Public Radio. So there is a government example out there that maybe we could think about at the state level. You know, I'm riffing here, but you cannot have transparency in government at any level without a free and a vibrant press. So I would absolutely, happily pick up Lori's baton on this.
All right, and that is all for the questions. That's 8 questions. We were able to get through them all, smooth sailing, and now we've come to the point where it's time for closing remarks. And we'll start with Doug, and we'll just come all the way down and end with Paulie. All right, and remember, you have 2 minutes for your closing remarks.
Well, thank you again to the League of Women Voters and to Lynn TV for hosting us tonight. This has been a real joy. We didn't get much chance to talk about healthcare tonight, but I know that it's a major issue on the minds of voters. It's a major challenge in terms of their ability to afford a cost of living here. And I hope in future forums we have a chance to talk about that more. I have a lifetime of experience delivering large-scale positive change here in Massachusetts for these communities and across the state. I'm also unencumbered by any special interest lobbyist contributions which will prohibit progress going forward. We need to make real progress on the major issues that we've talked about here tonight: affordability of housing and healthcare, climate change, reproductive health freedom, which we also didn't get a chance to talk about. My career as a leader in healthcare, both in the public sector and private sector, has given me the opportunity to share my skills, my experience, and drive change and improve lives for over 1 million people here in Massachusetts. I look forward to the opportunity to continue to share those skills and experiences with the people of this district, working in collaboration with my colleagues in the state legislature to deliver real solutions for this district. Thank you very much. I look forward to the election on September 6th, and I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you.
Well, I want to say thank you to Lynn TV for organizing this event tonight. I'm running to be your next state representative because I really feel that we have a lot of work to do on important issues, and I have the experience and the skills and the passion to get it done. We've talked a lot about policy tonight, but we didn't talk about something that's really important that a state rep does, and that would be constituent services. As an immigration attorney, I work cases, that's what I do. And I help my clients navigate a very difficult bureaucracy. And in this role, I work with some of our state's most diverse populations. When I leave my office, I leave with a huge bag of case files because this work goes around the clock. And I'm accustomed to helping my clients deal with emergency situations when the need comes up. It's very real. And the kind of advocate that this district needs is someone who will help them navigate the bureaucracy of state government. Whether it be problems with housing or healthcare or access to state services, whatever it may be. I'm the youngest of 9 kids. I'm pretty scrappy, and I want to bring those skills to the State House and do first-rate constituent services and hire first-rate staff to do it. And with 3 weeks to go until the election, I just want to distinguish myself. In addition to my commitment to constituent services, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I have worked on behalf of Democratic candidates. I've been an intern for Democratic on Capitol Hill, for Democratic congressman, Democratic senator. I've always been true to the Democratic Party, and I will never waver on that. And I'm the only candidate in this race who has gotten real results as an advocate for legislative change. I'm the only candidate that has successfully advocated for stronger gun laws in Massachusetts. And as a former cast member of a PBS documentary, Divided We Fall, I feel like I've been trained in how to promote civil dialogue. It's a skill set that's needed so much right now in politics. So thank you, and I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, of course, to Lynn TV and to the Marblehead League of Women Voters. Thank you for being an excellent moderator. Well done. When I kicked off my campaign in April at my headquarters, I said that this campaign was about people. It's about bringing people to the table and ensuring that everyone's viewpoint is heard. And having knocked on over 5,000 doors from across the district and hearing the stories of the people of Lynn, Marblehead, and Swampscott, and having lived in this district for my entire life, I am so proud of my team and I for the platform that we have put together. Our platform is ready to lead on these big picture issues because we can't be afraid of the big, bold changes that we need to take on these problems. The climate crisis, the housing shortage, our public transportation woes, our education coming out of COVID-19, all of these are big, complex problems, which means they have big, complex solutions, and we can't shy away from that. I have the experience to tackle these issues and be an effective state legislator. And I know that because look at the people who have endorsed me. Look at the people who have undeniable experience in this arena. Former Congressman Barney Frank, former Congressman John Tierney, longtime Select Board member in Marblehead, Jackie Belf-Becker. All of these people have seen my resume and heard my pitch, the same that I'm sharing with you, the voters, now. And they've said that I'm the one who can deliver for the district. As your next state representative, I'm going to do exactly that. I'm Tristan Smith, and I ask for your vote on September 6th.
Okay, well, I'm going to say a few words. Practical experience. That's what I have. I have practical experience. I have advocated for people for over a decade. I'm a union leader, and I have a diverse group of people that I have to represent. I have custodians and grave diggers. I have administrative. I have people with master's degrees in finance, in library sciences. And when I go into a negotiating room and sit across the table from the administrators, I find something for everyone, and I'm very successful at it. I am a coalition builder and a negotiator, and that's what you need in the State House. That's what we all need. We have to find some middle ground. We have to listen to each other. and we have to push forward with all of this. I have a vast network of grassroots political support. I have been endorsed by the teachers, by the Massachusetts nurses, by infrastructure, by industry, I've lost track, healthcare workers, in the SEIU 1199 and SEIU 509. The AFL-CIO has endorsed me as well, Massachusetts. And they said that Terri not only cares about people, she takes action to make their lives better. I've also been endorsed by political organizations and environmental groups. The Mass Women's Political Caucus said Terri is a rising star in Massachusetts Democrat, and Massachusetts politics, sorry. So, I am born and raised in this district. I'm 6th generation. I attended public schools. I'm a single mom with 3 kids, and I grew up in public housing. I know where you've all been, and that will make me an effective and empathetic advocate. You're not just numbers on a page to me or names. You're my coworkers because I work here. You're my friends and relatives because I live here and I grew up here. So a vote for me is a vote for the people and a voice for the people. So please vote Terri Tauro on September 6th and let me fight for you. Thank you.
Thank you to Lynn Community TV. Thank you, Mukala. Thank you, the Marblehead League of Women Voters, for sponsoring this evening. Thank you to my fellow candidates. We've been on this journey together for a very long time now. And thank you to all of you out there who are taking the time to listen to us, to consider us, and most importantly, to make your plan to vote. I hope these questions and answers have given you a better sense of my ideas and approaches. I very much view this process as applying for a job. You, the citizens of this district, are the employers, and I would be responsible to you and only to you if I'm fortunate enough to get elected. We've had great discussions here this evening. We haven't shared much about our personal experience, so I just want to say that I bring a deep knowledge of legislation and public policy. I've worked on both Capitol Hill and Beacon Hill. I've crafted bills and built coalitions to pass them. When kids needed child support enforcement, I wrote a law that to this day prevents parents from avoiding their responsibilities. And in the years before gay rights were more accepted, I organized the first hearing in the history of the U.S. House of Representatives on a bill that would have prevented discrimination against LGBTQ workers. I have spent the last several years helping leaders translate public policy into powerful speeches, and I have fought tirelessly for reproductive rights. So yes, I have the experience, but I also have the relationships. And in this job, relationships matter. So does longevity. That's why I don't view state representative as a stop on the career journey. I view it as my destination. Thank you so much. I would be honored to earn your vote on September 6th.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm going to take a bit of a different approach here. Climate change aside, I mentioned at the beginning that housing, public transportation, and education were my top priorities for the district. But what I will say is that all of this is tied to economic security or the lack thereof. Having, a 7.3% increase in revenues, which is almost unprecedented in the state this past year, but yet having this housing and homelessness crisis, these, underserved mental health and substance use treatments, a tragic MBTA system, the level of poverty that we do, the educational limitations, something's wrong. And we have to decide whether or not we're comfortable with, as a legislature, as a state, whether we're comfortable with a zip code being equal to your level of opportunity and success. And our economic structure was rooted in a racist and discriminatory history. It's not enough to pass neutral legislation. Neutral legislation policies are not neutral. Policies can either perpetuate a system of imbalance, however unintentional, or it can be something that is developed and implemented with an awareness of a broader cultural context. And I feel that our policies moving forward need to be conscious in developing that cultural context if we're really going to get even to transforming our basic priorities. Because at the bottom of housing, at the bottom of transportation, at the bottom of fair education is economic equality or some less economic inequality. I am not a person who acts in self-interest. I have been a leader. I know I can handle the resistance, and I have independence on all levels, financially and otherwise. I am very much in favor of public financing of campaigns. Otherwise, I think it has a corroding effect on the democratic process. I have the right conscience and I have the right experience serving my municipality for the last 10 years in a volunteer capacity. And for all of these reasons, both experience and morals and ethics, I feel I am the best candidate, and I ask for your vote on September 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for that. Give yourselves a round of applause for a great forum. Thank you all. And we have come to the end of our candidate forum. Be sure to visit lyntv.org to watch candidate interviews and watch other forums. Also, go to the Lynn Community Television Facebook page to get updates on everything election-wise. I'm Kyle Kabongo. Have a great evening.